Part 1. The Broken Bracelet. Ikenna Bello had rehearsed this moment for 2 weeks. He stood in the dining room of their Lagos mansion, holding a small velvet box, watching his wife Amara unwrap it slowly. Inside sat a slim gold bracelet, nothing extravagant, but chosen with care. He had noticed her admiring one like it months ago and never forgot. A bracelet? Amara turned it over in her fingers, her expression flat. Ikenna, is this a joke? I saw it and thought of you, he said quietly. I wanted it to mean something. Mean something? She laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Noji's husband just bought her a Range Rover for their anniversary. Chief Adio flew his wife to Dubai, and you give me jewelry from a mall kiosk? Ikenna's jaw tightened. This isn't about who spent more, Amara. Easy for you to say when you're the one holding the smaller gift. The guests at the dinner table shifted uncomfortably. Someone cleared their throat. A cousin quietly reached for her purse. Amara, undeterred, set the bracelet down hard enough that it skittered off the table and onto the marble floor, the clasp snapping in two. The room went silent. Ikenna looked at the broken bracelet, then at his wife. For 6 years of marriage, he had always been the one to apologize first, to smooth things over, to explain himself until she felt better. This time, he said nothing. He simply stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out onto the terrace alone. Amara crossed her arms, telling herself she had every right to be disappointed. In her mind, she deserved grander gestures, gifts that matched the lifestyle she saw other wives enjoying online and at galas. She didn't understand, not yet, that something inside her husband had quietly shifted that night, something that would not be easy to undo. She had no idea that within a few short months she would discover a hidden truth so devastating it would make every complaint she'd ever made feel unbearable to remember. A truth Ikenna had been protecting her from for years, at a cost she never once considered. For now, though, she simply walked back inside, poured herself a glass of wine, and scrolled through pictures of her friend's new penthouse, already composing her next comparison. What Amara didn't know was that the real story hadn't even started yet, and what she was about to uncover would change how she saw her entire marriage. Stay with me for Part 2. Part 2. The Perfect Couple. To everyone who knew them, Ikenna and Amara Bello were the definition of success. Their estate sat behind tall gates in one of Lagos's most sought-after neighborhoods, complete with a fountain out front and 2 imported cars in the driveway. Ikenna ran a construction firm that had built half the shopping plazas in the state. Amara never worked a day since their wedding, spending her time at brunches, salons, and charity boards. From the outside, it looked effortless. Women at church whispered about how fortunate Amara was to have landed a husband so hardworking and devoted. What they didn't see was the quiet exhaustion behind Ikenna's smile, or the growing list of grievances Amara kept, sharpened by every post she scrolled past online. Nothing Ikenna did was ever quite enough. When he took her to Zanzibar for their 5th anniversary, she spent the whole trip comparing the resort to one a friend had posted about. When he surprised her with a new handbag, she mentioned that her friend Bianca already owned 3 of the same design. When he came home early to cook her favorite meal, she asked why they never went out like other couples did. Each time, Ikenna absorbed the disappointment quietly. He rarely argued, he rarely defended himself. He simply nodded, adjusted, and tried again the next time, hoping the next gesture would finally be the one that satisfied her. Slowly, without either of them fully noticing, something began to change. Ikenna stopped telling her about the wins at work. He stopped mentioning the new contracts, the new buildings, the late nights spent solving problems most men would have walked away from. He kept his dreams to himself, because every time he shared them, they somehow became another opportunity for comparison. At family functions, his relatives noticed he had grown quieter. He used to be the one telling stories, making the room laugh. Now he sat near the edge of gatherings, checking his phone, waiting for a reason to leave early. Amara noticed too, in the way you notice a light dimming without asking why. She assumed it was stress from work. She never once considered that the growing distance between them had anything to do with her. But that distance was about to reveal something no one at that dinner table could have predicted. And it starts with a warning Amara refused to hear. Coming up in Part 3. Part 3. The Warning She Ignored. The Sunday after the broken bracelet, Amara's Aunt Comfort pulled her into the kitchen while the rest of the family gathered outside for lunch. "Amara, can I speak plainly with you?" "Of course, Auntie." Amara smiled, the polite smile she reserved for lectures she had already decided to ignore. That husband of yours is a good man. Men like him are rare. Amara rolled her eyes. Auntie, please, not this again. I'm serious. Comfort lowered her voice. You compare him to everyone else's husband, but you don't see what he does for this family behind closed doors. Nobody's perfect, Auntie. You don't understand what it's like being married to him. No, Comfort said gently, setting down the spoon she'd been stirring with. I think it's you who doesn't understand what you have. Amara waved the comment away, the way she had waved away similar warnings from her mother, from her college friends, from anyone who dared to suggest that her constant dissatisfaction might be the problem, rather than Ikenna's gifts. In her mind, she deserved more, much more, and no one seemed willing to admit that her husband simply wasn't trying hard enough. Over the following weeks, Ikenna grew even quieter. He started staying at the office later than usual, sometimes not returning until Amara had already gone to bed. When he did come home, he went straight to his study and closed the door. The mansion, once filled with laughter during his early years there, now felt like a museum. Beautiful, expensive, and cold. Amara noticed the shift, but told herself it meant nothing. She was confident Ikenna would never actually leave. He had tolerated her complaints for 6 years. Surely he would tolerate them for 60 more. She believed, without ever examining why, that he would always be exactly where she left him. One evening he came home unusually late. Amara sat curled on the sofa scrolling through her phone and looked up only to frown. You're late again. Normally, he would have apologized, offered an explanation, tried to ease the tension. This time, he only nodded once and walked upstairs without a word. For a brief second, something uneasy stirred in Amara's chest, a feeling she couldn't quite name. She pushed it down and returned to her phone. She had no way of knowing that Ikenna had begun finding small, quiet reasons to spend less time in the home they shared, and that every extra hour away was widening a gap that would soon be almost impossible to close. What Amara didn't realize was that Ikenna's silence wasn't just tiredness, it was the beginning of something she wouldn't understand until it was far too late. Find out what happens next in Part 4. My Dad 4, Cracks Behind the Curtain. The weeks that followed felt strange in a way Amara couldn't quite explain. On the surface, nothing had changed. The mansion was still theirs, the cars still gleamed in the driveway, the designer wardrobe still filled her closet. Ikenna kept providing everything, exactly as he always had. But underneath, something essential had gone, missing. The warmth that used to fill his eyes when he walked through the door was gone. The eagerness he once showed to be near her had faded into a kind of polite distance. Some nights he came home and disappeared straight into his study. Other nights he ate dinner in near silence and excused himself early, claiming exhaustion. Amara noticed, of course. She wasn't blind, but she convinced herself it was simply the pressure of running a growing company, nothing more. Instead of asking questions, she buried herself deeper into the version of life she saw scrolling past her every day. Vacation photos, anniversary surprises, private jets, oceanfront weddings. Every image became another measuring stick, and Ikenna kept coming up short. Look at this, she'd say, turning her phone toward him. Did you see what Sandra's husband got her? And this villa they rented in Greece? Ikenna would glance at the screen, nod once, and return to whatever he was doing. His silence irritated her more than any argument could have. She wanted a reaction. She wanted him to feel the same dissatisfaction she felt. Instead, he simply absorbed it and said nothing, which somehow felt worse. A month later, Amara attended a charity gala, hosted by some of Lagos's wealthiest families, held inside a ballroom dripping with crystal chandeliers. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Every woman there looked as though she'd stepped out of a magazine. As usual, Amara spent much of the night comparing herself to the other guests. One woman in particular caught her eye. Ngozi, married to a shipping magnate, always dressed immaculately, always posting the kind of glamorous life Amara secretly envied. For years, Amara had quietly resented how effortless Ngozi's happiness seemed. She had no idea that, before the night ended, everything she believed about that happiness was about to be turned upside down. What Amara overheard that night at the gala would be the first crack in everything she thought she understood about perfect marriages, including her own assumptions. Don't miss Part 5. Part 5. Behind Closed Doors. Midway through the gala, Amara found Ngozi alone near the balcony, away from the noise of the crowd. She approached, ready to offer the usual compliment about her dress or her jewelry, when she noticed Ngozi's hands trembling around her champagne glass. Ngozi, are you all right? Ngozi's composed expression cracked, and tears began sliding down her face before she could stop them. My husband has been seeing someone else for almost 2 years, she whispered. Everyone thinks we're the perfect couple. If only they knew. Amara stood frozen, unsure what to say. The woman she had envied for years, the one with the villa photos and the designer wardrobe, was quietly falling apart behind a smile she'd perfected for the cameras. The words stayed with Amara long after she left the gala that night. A few weeks later, at a birthday celebration for another wealthy family, she overheard 2 women discussing a divorce lawyer in hushed tones near the dessert table. When she realized whose marriage they were describing, her stomach dropped. It was a couple everyone admired, a couple people constantly pointed to as relationship goals. Behind closed doors, that marriage was already over. Then came a third revelation. At a business luncheon, Amara sat beside a woman named Chiamaka, known for the loving captions she wrote under photos of her and her husband. Halfway through the meal, Chiamaka sighed and set down her fork. Honestly, I can't remember the last real conversation my husband and I had, she admitted quietly. We only perform for the pictures now. One by one, the marriages Amara had spent years envying were revealing the same ugly truth. Affairs, silence, resentment, performance. For the first time, a question began forming in her mind that she couldn't shake. What if the life she'd been comparing her own marriage to wasn't real at all? What if she had spent years chasing an illusion while overlooking something genuine sitting right beside her? Meanwhile, at home, the distance between her and Ikenna kept widening. He left earlier, returned later, spoke less. One evening, while he was away at a business dinner, Amara went looking for a property document she needed for an upcoming trip. She remembered Ikenna kept his important paperwork locked inside a cabinet in his study, a cabinet she had never once opened in 6 years of marriage. She found the spare key tucked inside an old drawer. She hesitated for a long moment, key in hand. What Amara found behind that locked cabinet door would unravel everything she thought she knew about her husband, and there was no going back once she saw it. Continue to Part 6. Part 6, The Locked Cabinet. The cabinet creaked open slower than Amara expected. At first, everything looked ordinary: stacks of business contracts, property records, invoices from various construction sites. Nothing that explained the odd feeling twisting in her stomach. Then she saw a brown folder near the back, her own name written across the front in Ikenna's handwriting. Curious, she pulled it out and opened it. Inside were bank statements, property agreements, medical receipts, loan documents, years of paperwork she had never seen or been told about. The deeper she read, the more confused she became. Large payments, unfamiliar amounts, transactions she couldn't place. Her hands started to shake. She kept reading. Then she found a land sale agreement that made her stop breathing for a moment. The land had belonged to Ikenna's late father, a plot he'd once described as priceless because of its sentimental value, land he had always talked about developing someday in his father's memory. According to this document, he had sold it years ago. The amount listed matched, almost to the naira, the year they had purchased their mansion. Amara grabbed another folder, then another. Each one revealed something she'd never known existed. The study, once just a quiet room she rarely entered, suddenly felt smaller, the silence inside it deafening. For 6 years, she had believed she understood her husband's finances completely, had believed she knew every account, every investment, every major decision he made. She was beginning to realize how wrong that belief had been, and how little she had actually asked about the life they built together. She lowered herself slowly into his chair, the leather still warm as though he had only just stepped away. The papers remained spread across the desk in front of her, page after page of a story she had never been told. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened computer screen beside the folders, and for a moment she barely recognized the woman looking back. Outside, the city hummed faintly in the distance, oblivious to what was unfolding inside that quiet study. Somewhere in this stack of receipts and agreements was an explanation for the man Ikenna had slowly become, distant, guarded, exhausted in a way no amount of rest seemed to fix. Whatever truth was buried in these files, she sensed it was about to change everything she thought she knew about the man she had married, and about the woman she had allowed herself to become beside him. If this story has you hooked already, drop a comment telling me what you think Amara is about to discover. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The full truth is coming in Part 7, and it's heavier than anything you've read so far. Part 7, what he never told her. Amara sat alone in the study long after her discovery, the mansion silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. She picked the land sale agreement back up, reading it again as if the words might change the second time. She remembered how proud Ikenna had been of that inheritance, how he used to talk about honoring his father by building something meaningful on that land one day. It wasn't just property. It was one of the only things his father had left him. The date on the sale caught her attention immediately. It matched the exact year she had pressured him relentlessly to buy their current mansion. The same mansion she now lived in, the same one she had complained wasn't grand enough on more than one occasion. Tears blurred her vision as she opened another folder. What she found next left her speechless. Tuition receipts from a private university, paid consistently for 4 years. At first the name didn't register, then it did. Her younger brother. For years her family had believed a scholarship covered most of his tuition. These documents told a different story. Ikenna had been quietly paying every semester, every year, without telling a single soul, without ever asking for thanks. Amara covered her mouth, feeling sick. Why would he keep something like that hidden? Why hide something so generous? She kept searching. Another thick folder held hospital bills, treatment records, surgery costs, all under her mother's name. The total was staggering. Her mother's life-saving medical care years earlier, the treatment her family had scraped together for, through what she'd assumed were community donations, had actually been paid in full by Ikenna, quietly, without praise, without ever mentioning it once. More discoveries followed. Investments he had walked away from, business expansions he had postponed indefinitely, personal goals he had quietly set aside, all so he could keep affording the lifestyle she constantly demanded. The bags, the vacations, the parties, the image she needed to maintain. For years she had criticized him, compared him, made him feel small in front of others. All the while, he had been carrying weight she never once noticed, sacrificing pieces of his own life just to keep her satisfied. The guilt hit her like a physical blow. That night she didn't sleep. Every harsh word she'd ever thrown at him replayed in her mind, sharper each time. For the first time in years, Amara looked honestly at who she had become. She didn't like what she saw. The next morning, Amara decided to change everything. But some damage doesn't undo itself just because you finally see it. Find out if it's too late in Part 8. Part 8. Too little. Amara woke before dawn, something she hadn't done in years. She moved quietly through the kitchen, preparing Ikenna's favorite breakfast, the way his mother used to make it, a recipe she'd learned but rarely bothered with. When he came downstairs, he stopped in the doorway, visibly surprised. "You made breakfast. I thought it would be nice," she said softly. He thanked her, polite as always, but something in his expression had changed. The spark that once lit up his face at small gestures from her was simply absent. He ate quietly, then left for a walk without lingering. Amara sat alone at the table afterward, the distance between them suddenly feeling enormous, more permanent than she'd realized. Over the following weeks, she worked hard to become someone different. She stopped comparing him to other men. She stopped mentioning what other wives received from their husbands. She listened when he spoke. She asked about his day. She thanked him for things she used to take for granted. For the first time in years, she genuinely tried to be the partner he had always needed. One evening on the balcony overlooking the city, she finally found the courage to say the words she'd been holding in. "Ikenna, I'm sorry." He looked at her but said nothing. "I've hurt you for years. I didn't appreciate you." Her voice cracked. A long silence stretched between them before he finally spoke. "I know." The words were calm, not bitter, not emotional, and somehow that hurt more than if he had shouted. Months earlier, he would have reassured her instantly, pulled her close, told her everything would be fine. Now he simply looked tired, deeply and quietly tired, as though something inside him had already made peace with letting go. No matter how hard she tried in the weeks that followed, she couldn't bring back the version of her husband she remembered, the one who used to rush home just to see her face, who told stories that made the whole room laugh, who lit up whenever she walked into a room. That version of Ikenna felt gone. At the grand opening of one of his newest developments, surrounded by investors and community leaders, Amara noticed a woman speaking with him near the project display, listening intently, laughing at something he said. Nothing improper was happening. They were simply talking, but it was the way the woman looked at him that unsettled Amara most. Genuine admiration. Real respect. And for a brief second, Ikenna smiled, Not the polite smile he gave everyone, but a real one, the kind Amara hadn't seen directed at her in a very long time. A cold, tight fear settled into her chest. If Amara could finally see her husband's worth, she realized someone else already had, and that terrifying thought would follow her for the rest of the story. Keep watching for part 9. Past tense. Her name was Halima, a project coordinator who worked closely with Ikenna's development team on community housing initiatives. Over the following months, Amara noticed her more than once, always at a respectful distance, always simply talking business. Nothing crossed a line, nothing needed to. That was almost worse. Halima listened when Ikenna spoke. She thanked him for his guidance. She noticed the qualities Amara had spent 6 years overlooking: his patience, his quiet generosity, the way he carried other people's burdens without ever asking for credit. She admired him not for his money or his success, but for who he actually was underneath it. Watching them together at a fundraising event, Amara finally understood something devastating. Another woman was appreciating the very man she had spent years tearing down. That realization broke something open in her that night. She cried harder than she had in years, not out of jealousy toward Halima, but from the crushing weight of finally understanding what she herself had done. Love rarely ends in one dramatic explosion. More often it erodes slowly, one complaint at a time, one comparison at a time, one moment of disrespect at a time, until something that once felt unbreakable simply runs out. A few weeks later, Amara asked Ikenna to join her for dinner on the terrace. The evening was quiet, the breeze gentle. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Amara broke the silence. "I need to tell you something." He looked at her calmly, waiting. She took a breath, tears already forming. "I spent years chasing appearances instead of appreciating what I had. I compared you to other men. I made you feel like nothing you did was ever enough. And the whole time, you were sacrificing everything for me, while I demanded more." She continued, voice trembling. "You sold your father's land for me. You paid for my brother's education without a word. You covered my mother's medical bills in silence. You gave up your own dreams, and I never once said thank you." For the first time in years, she spoke without excuses, without pride, without deflection. "I failed you." Ikenna sat quietly for a long moment before answering. "I loved you, Amara." The sentence shattered something in her chest, not because of the words themselves, but because of the tense he chose. Loved, not love. "I spent years trying to be enough for you," he said, his voice tired but steady. "No matter what I did, it never seemed to be. I know I lost myself trying to please you instead," she whispered, sobbing quietly now. He finally stood. "I forgive you." For a moment, hope flickered in her chest. Then he added, "But forgiveness doesn't always repair what's already broken." The words landed like a closing door. 1 year later, everything had changed, and the ending Amara never expected reveals the hardest truth of this entire story. Join me for the final part, Part 10. Part 10. The riches she overlooked. Months passed. Amara kept working on herself, becoming softer, more grateful, more present. But every bit of growth arrived tangled with the same painful truth. Some lessons come too late to matter. She would often sit alone in the same mansion she'd once insisted wasn't grand enough, thinking about the husband who had quietly given her more than she ever recognized while it was happening. She had finally learned to appreciate him only after she had already pushed him away. The greatest loss wasn't the luxury, the status, or the lifestyle she'd fought so hard to maintain. It was the realization that she had spent years chasing something shinier while failing to value the man already standing beside her. An elder in her family once told her, "Many people spend their whole lives counting what they lack, only to discover too late that they were surrounded by riches the entire time." Amara finally understood exactly what that meant. Understanding, unfortunately, arrived long after the damage was already done. 1 year after that final dinner on the terrace, the divorce was finalized quietly. No public scandal, no bitter fighting, no revenge, just the slow, painful end of a marriage that had cracked apart gradually over many years. Ikenna moved into a smaller home near the lakeside community where much of his development work took place. For the first time in a long while, he looked genuinely at peace, not because of wealth or success, but because he had finally found stillness. Several months later, his friendship with Halima grew into something deeper. She never compared him to anyone else and valued him exactly as he was, appreciating the same qualities Amara had spent years dismissing. Slowly, they began building a life together, Amara remained in the mansion she'd once fought so hard to secure. The designer bags no longer excited her. The luxury cars in the driveway no longer impressed her. She had finally learned something money could never buy back. She had lost a good man not because he wasn't enough, but because she had spent years convincing him he wasn't. Many evenings, she sat alone on that same balcony overlooking the city lights, remembering the man who once loved her fully, who sacrificed pieces of his own life for hers, the man she only truly appreciated after he was already gone. Sometimes a second chance arrives too late. Sometimes love doesn't leave with shouting or slam doors. It simply leaves quietly, one small moment of appreciation withheld at a time. If there's one thing worth remembering from this story, it's this. Never measure your blessings against someone else's highlight reel. Appreciation builds love. Constant criticism slowly destroys it. And sometimes the people we take most for granted are the ones sacrificing the most for us. What do you think? Was Amara solely to blame, or did Ikenna's silence play its own part? Share your thoughts below, and if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.